What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Atletico Madrid versus Liverpool in the UEFA Champions League. And before we start, check out both my books. They're online, they're on Amazon, and there's links in the description below. Check out Keyframe. It's how I made this video, and we're doing a promotion now with Keyframe. If you sign up for Keyframe, you get a free copy of my book, so be sure to take advantage of that. But let's get right into the video. So Liverpool here in yellow, they built from the back using Alisson, their goalkeeper, to split their two central defenders. Their fullbacks position themselves a little bit deeper, and we'll see why in just a minute. Atletico Madrid look to counter the Liverpool structure in a 5-3-2, using asymmetry in their pressing system, having one of their wingbacks press up the right hand side to counter the fullback, and then on the left hand side they'd have their midfield three shift out to the fullbacks. And one of the reasons why Liverpool went with deep fullbacks in this match is to create more space from the Atletico Madrid's wingback and then their midfield. So this way, Atletico Madrid players would have to shift across a larger distance to then gain access and apply pressure to the ball. And what would then happen was space would then be created through the center for players like James Milner, Firmino, and Naby Keita going forward, with then Jordan Henderson at the base of this. And then as we see going forward in the midfield third, we'll look at Trent Alexander-Arnold playing more in the half space. We see a similar build-up again with the fullbacks maintaining their deeper positioning, and now Alisson splitting the two central defenders to create a back three in build-up. Then we have our four-man diamond midfield with Firmino playing as our false nine, and then our two advanced attacking midfielders with Jordan Henderson at the base. So from here, Atletico Madrid press with two forwards, and their three midfielders maintain their central positioning in the corridors, looking to use man orientation through the half space, and then a spatial orientation marking method to cut out the pass to Firmino using a cover shadow. Then with their defensive line playing with an asymmetric pressing system, and their wingback advancing on to then press the Liverpool left fullback Andy Robertson. This left them with a +1 numerical advantage at the back, looking to defend against the wide wingers of Liverpool, and then the false nine of Roberto Firmino. So typically one central defender would step to Firmino between the lines depending how far he dropped, while the other two central defenders and the weak side wingback would look to create direct access to the wide wingers. And one of the reasons the wingers stayed wide for Liverpool in this match, they started their wide positioning earlier, so then they would arrive later into central positions when they would make their inverted runs off of the Firmino dropping. So as we see, the back five for Atletico Madrid was disconnected, so by maintaining this wide position, they'd have then more space to run into and get in behind from a direct pass from their deeper players. Moving into the midfield third, typically we would create some sort of build-up with three players, either Andy Robertson or James Milner oftentimes filling this role, depending on who was creating the width. If James Milner provided the third build-up option in their first line, then Andy Robertson would most likely be the player creating width. Or they would create dual width with Andy Robertson and Mane. But from here, Jordan Henderson was at the base of their midfield, with then Firmino playing as their false nine, as they did in their initial third. So this would give them a 4 versus 3 numerical advantage when they were able to isolate the midfielders. Now, what made it so hard for Liverpool to isolate this midfield was the pressing and the shifting of their two central forwards to then use their cover shadow to block direct access into the holding midfielder and an interior midfielder through the half space. Then behind them we have the man orientation combined with the spatial orientation marking methods of Atletico Madrid, looking to shift across and play more man-oriented in the half spaces and more spatially oriented in central areas. And as we see, their marking system and the connections are very calculated between the Atletico Madrid players, which made it very tough, and the high level of compactness Atletico play with makes it very hard for players like Firmino to receive the ball between the lines. Liverpool used pinning methods to try and increase the amount of space their midfielders had, with a player like Trent Alexander-Arnold playing through the half space in this example, or this could have been Salah, and then having one of their interior midfielders drop into the wide area. So that's one way they were able to isolate the midfielders of Liverpool against the Atletico Madrid three-man midfield, and using the full width and not being afraid to drop their midfielders into wider positions. Then, by maintaining this high and wide position from their wingers, it also created a pinning against their Atletico Madrid wingbacks to then allow more space in the wide area for more fluid play. Also, they were able to use progression in the first line with this third auxiliary central defender to then progress up the field via dribbling around the opposing team's mid-block. Now we see on the weak side Andy Robertson creating the width as we said he would at times. Two central defenders, and now we see Trent Alexander-Arnold positioning himself in the half space, allowing then James Milner to create dual width with Mo Salah and form this overload in the wide area. So this overload and isolate situation we have from Liverpool was something they often used with their two wingers pinning wide central defenders or pinning two defenders of Atletico Madrid as their third central defender would jump into the midfield following the run of Bobby Firmino. So as we see, their back five with the central defender jumping and the other using man orientation against Sadio Mane, creating a slight break in the Atletico Madrid back five could potentially open up an avenue in behind, which Liverpool played upon, but they also looked to take advantage of the overload that they had, committing so many players to one half of the field and then releasing a player like Andy Robertson down the weak side to then complete the overload and isolate concept. And with such a compact defensive structure from Atletico Madrid in their 5-3-2 as we see here, this overload and isolate concept could be something that's very efficient and very effective against an Atletico Madrid very compact unit. So then in the second half, when the red card happened and Antoine Griezmann was sent off, we saw more freedom in their first two lines of build-up and more use of the half space to then progress into the final third of the field. And what this gave was freedom for their front three players to maintain a more narrow positioning, as well as their midfielders to then find more space in the wide areas. And what was the most important aspect of this and drawing out the 5-3-1 now from Atletico Madrid was the use of the half space in the first and second line of build-up. So when Atletico Madrid were defending and Liverpool were in possession and Liverpool used the half spaces to progress the ball and they drew out a midfielder of Atletico Madrid, this would create an imbalance in players going forward and often lead to the creation of a free player between the lines. But what saved Atletico Madrid was their high level of compactness and their structure between their five defenders and three-man midfield and their shifting principles to then control this space and not get sucked out too wide when the ball would go into the half space and the players would try and attract pressure from the Atletico Madrid players. So here again we have our 5-3-1 after the red card occurred for Atletico Madrid, and now we can see Trent Alexander-Arnold coming into the half space as long as the left-sided central defender for Liverpool came into the half space and looked to progress the ball. They had the cover of Van Dijk, so they were able to then, as they continued to play with a man advantage, they were able to use this advantage to have more freedom in their first line of build-up and use their central defenders more efficiently to try and pull out a midfielder of Atletico Madrid. Then we see the players occupying advanced positions for Liverpool, looking to really emphasize a numerical advantage, and their wide players, Andy Robertson, and a midfielder dropping into the wide area on the weak side, creating width and trying to provoke a jumping action from the wing back to then create a 2 versus 1 and release Mane or Salah in behind. But now with Atletico Madrid in possession, they went with a three-man build-up using their three central defenders, their flexible three-man midfield, which often played asymmetrically, creating different dynamics on each side of the field, and their two forwards, with Joao Felix often dropping deeper to try and create a four-man midfield and create a numerical advantage with him being the free player. Then they used high wingbacks and a second striker to pin the back four of Liverpool to try and prevent the Liverpool defenders from jumping and following a player dropping into the midfield to try and create the advantage against the 4-3-3 of Liverpool. Liverpool's front three matched up quite well with their cover shadows against the midfield three of Atletico Madrid as they went to go press the first line. So Atletico's main source of progression was direct play in the wide area through overloads or finding the free player in a more advanced position. Now for our last picture, when Liverpool went a man up and Atletico Madrid got the red card, their build-up often suffered and it gave Liverpool a lot more cover in their back four, allowing them to press more intensely. So what we mean by this is we still have our three-man build-up in our first line, but now with our midfielders, instead of playing with two advanced players, we often saw asymmetry with a double pivot to give them more security in their build-up. So if any loss of possession occurred, they would be more effective in transitioning defensively against a fast counterattack from Liverpool. Then we see our near side wingback also positioning himself deeper around the ball to have a high volume of players around the ball, while on the weak side would be the target for any direct play. We'd have a slight wide structure of a three-player, which could then be the source of a progression if a long diagonal switch were to occur, and securing the second ball would be easier with a strongly connected wide structure of three players. And that's going to wrap up the analysis, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.